just study the truth. And then that way you'll be able to spot the counterfeit when it's presented to you. False gods, false religions.
It's not a study of religion. Everybody considers this ridiculous. We know the Greeks came up with their gods. The Romans came up with their gods. I don't know of anyone who's still like worshiping Zeus. Okay, so in today's episode, we get to talk about 3 controversial topics that we are teaching in our homeschool and why we are including them and how we're going about teaching them. So these are things that I didn't grow up learning. I don't know if Elisha did. We'll get into that later on in the episode because we haven't talked about this. But yeah, we have talked about this, but not his experience. And so anyways, if you guys enjoy this episode, give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for subscribing. And thanks for sharing this podcast with people that you know and love. Also, your reviews mean a lot. So thank you guys.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
Okay, before we jump in to these 3 controversial subjects that we are teaching our children in their homeschooling, I wanted to let you know that at Voetberg Music Academy, we are running our biggest music competition ever. We're giving away thousands of dollars in prize money. This is happening in the 3rd week of October. And the reason I'm telling you about it now is because I want to give you time to practice. I want to give you time to prepare. And there's going to be different divisions. Okay. So there's going to be a piano division, 2 different age groups within the piano division. Same thing with the fiddle, 2 different age groups. Guitar, 2 different age groups. We're going to do 1 age group for mandolin and ukulele. But if you play any of those instruments, even if you're not currently a Voetberg Music Academy student, we're going to open this up to you. Okay, so it's free to participate if you're a Voetberg Music Academy student. If you are not a Voetberg Music Academy student, you're going to have to pay a small entry fee for the competition. But we're giving away, like I said, thousands of dollars in prize money. And the criteria is you're going to need to play a fast song and a slow song, or an upbeat song and a slower song. And it's going to be submission by video. And we're going to have 3 different judges. Anyways, I could go on and on about it, but I'm really excited about it. My kids are thrilled about it. I love how competition just makes my children practice so much more attentively and intentionally. And I know that's how it was for me growing up. And so, I know it's a cheesy saying like, hey, it's not about winning or losing, it's about getting better. But I really feel that way with music competitions. Of course, you want to compete to win and you want to do your best. And we're giving away prize money for winners, right? That we want to reward excellence. However, regardless of what level you are, you will get better just by practicing for a competition and preparing for a competition. So that in and of itself, in my mind, is worth the participation. That's all I'll say about that, but you guys can check the link below for some more info.
Awesome. Yeah, to join, I think they just need a Voetberg Music Academy membership, right?
Yeah, we're going to make a special sign-up link for people that are not a current Voetberg Music Academy student that's going to get them access to all the pages where the contest is happening.
Oh, cool. All right. There you go. I didn't even know about that. Okay. So today I knew that we didn't learn these things growing up. And so I think I was curious about these subjects that we're going to talk about today because they were referenced all the time. I loved classic literature, and classic literature was something that was totally approved in our home. It was encouraged in our home. And even though I don't believe my parents really either read much classic literature, they loved that I was reading it, and they were comfortable with that. That said, 2 things were referenced a ton, and that was Shakespeare and mythology as reference points in classic literature, and art was also referenced a lot. But those are 3 things we didn't study, kind of seeing them potentially as inhibiting to our, maybe the mythology as inhibiting to our faith, and then the Shakespeare as just kind of like inappropriate. And so, why would you go there? It's just bloody or inappropriate. And so, Elisha, what about you?
I would say pretty similar in the sense that our bookshelf was filled with classic books. And I enjoyed them from time to time. They weren't like pushed upon me, or they weren't a requirement. But I remember at a young age really enjoying David Copperfield, or, I guess Scarlett Pimpernel, or a lot of the Alexander Dumas stuff, like at a pretty young age. And so that was definitely available for us. I'm with you in regards to references to Shakespeare, and just art in general. I think, even as we have the Van Gogh book, the Da Vinci, like I was just so unfamiliar with any of these people's works. And this is no shade on I think it was intentional with my parents. It just wasn't something that they saw as being valuable. I don't know if they would have said it was inhibiting. Obviously there is art that is very explicit, and you could call just like adult content. And you're like, why would you expose kids to this? And so I think they could have that perspective on it. And then with the mythology, that never once hit my radar. Even the references in classic literature, it just didn't pique any interest, and it wasn't something that we studied. And it was, I think we took the approach, and I think a lot of people take this approach, and that is, what they say the Secret Service does when studying for counterfeits. It's like, hey, why study all the false bills? You can't, right? There's always going to be a new counterfeit bill being developed each day. And so, I don't even know if this is a true tactic or method of training, but it's what people say. They say they just study the real thing, right? Just study real dollar bills or real $100 bills or whatever they're studying for. And then that way you'll be able to spot the counterfeit when it's presented to you. And I think we had that mindset in regards to false gods, false religions. And it was just like, hey, just study the truth. And I think that's a common attitude amongst Christian homeschool homes.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when I kind of started digging into Greek mythology when I was older. I was like, this is not a religion study because it is more, I don't know what category it would technically fall in, if it's like a classical study, but I don't know what that is because it correlates a lot with literature and social stuff, psychology, the humanities, I would say, and how humans interact, but it's not a study of religion. And I think because everybody considers this ridiculous. Like, we know the Greeks came up with their gods, the Romans came up with their gods. I don't know of anyone who's still like worshiping Zeus. I don't even know how much those people actually worship their gods. It sounds like they were pretty aware, the Greeks and Romans, that they came up to these. I know we have like the Temple of Athena and all these things, but it sounds like they were pretty familiar with the concept that they created these beings.
Right. Yeah. It's
instead of like God creating creation, like they created the gods,
Yeah, it was very human-centered. It was like, okay, we created awesome gods. Let's celebrate us by having these temples and celebrating these cool gods we created. Yeah,
it was almost more a celebration of humanness, I feel like. Yeah. Like self-worship in a way.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I'm not concerned. The more that we've dug into this, it's like my kids are not going to think Zeus is the one throwing the thunderbolts up there. Like, it is just very fictional, and the stories are just crazy. I would say that obviously with mythology too, there's a wide span of appropriateness or not. Like, it can be very lewd, or it can be done in a very tame way.
Yeah.
Even though the stories are a little crazy, you don't have the same inappropriate. I mean, it can get in regards to clothes or relationships or, all that stuff. It can be pretty scandalous if you want to take it there, and people do.
Well, and I think that's actually a unique challenge to the, I guess, literature in general and the classic stuff, because there's not like ratings on it like there is with modern day movies. You can really get blindsided, I think, by some content. And I think the same thing probably exists with mythology and with art, where you're like, whoa, this is a piece by the same artist, and I did not see that coming. Like, why didn't we get a rating on this? And I know you can Google stuff ahead of time, but you really have to be proactive, and it's not like there's a rating system like there is for movies. And so that is something that catches me off guard, I think, with mythology and with literature, is it's like, oh man, like that was actually pretty intense, or that was actually pretty explicit. And so I think it is worth being aware of that.
Yeah. Like being wise and cautious and knowing that because the secular belief system does adapt these things. And then there are Christians that are teaching them too. It's just all over the map with what your exposure could be with these different topics. But it is like that in literature too. It's like that really in any classic study, like you were saying. So anyways, that said, we started with mythology. That was the first classical subject we introduced into our homeschool. And it was, I don't know how you felt about it, but for me, it was a curiosity. I felt like a lot of dots I wanted to have connected. And I was like, I would like the children to have these dots already connected. When we hear about, like, I was reading this kid's book of the Greek myths, and they bring up Pandora as a god and Pandora's box. It's like, oh, when we reference Pandora's box, this is what we're referencing, where she just had this insatiable sense of curiosity. She wanted to find out what was in it. She took the lid off, and then she could never get anything back inside. And all these evil things flew out into the world, right? But also what left Pandora's box was hope. And so we still have hope. And so it's just kind of like, oh, whenever we reference Pandora's box, that's what it's going back to. And I think there's so many things in mythology that we reference today that we have no clue what the context is, even outside of other authors. I was just reading a book with our book club on, what was it, that one I was just telling you about the guy, A Severe Mercy. And it's a Christian book, and there's letters from C.S. Lewis in there to the author. And C.S. Lewis is referencing, I'm going to butcher these names because I haven't gotten to this part, but like Desmond, I don't know, Ophelia, and these different like Shakespeare characters in there, basically, just like he also references mythology a lot. And I'm like, I have no clue what he's meaning by that. He's not explaining what he means, because the name in and of itself is supposed to be the explanation. Yeah,
we do that, I think, so often in our vernacular, in our English language, without even realizing it, where you say it's like a shortcut. It gives your listener, whether that's in a one-on-one conversation or you're presenting, it gives people context, or it gives people like a wider scope just by making one statement. And we have like a bunch of catchphrases, it's like, oh, the canary in the coal mine, or, like, what's another one, like
what's the canary in the coal mine?
Oh, you shouldn't have asked me. I forget what that one is. I think it had to do, like, they would send canaries down a coal mine to see if there was like poison gases coming out. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think it's something like that. See, I shouldn't have used that one because...
That sounds good to me.
Is that good? We'll go with that. I'm trying to think of something else. Or even if we reference Aesop's fables, just kind of like, hey, don't cry wolf. I don't know if that's an Aesop's fable, but it's that type of story that we all know.
The fox and the sour grapes. Or, like, oh, you're just being bitter just because you can't have what you want.
Right, the emperor's new clothes. Like, we say these things and we're like, oh, got it. And we kind of get caught up to speed. And I think that happens all the time in writing, and it's way over my head. I'm kind of like, well, I hope to fill in I guess I hope to fill this in later on in the book because I have no clue what he's talking about, but it would be nice to know.
Yeah, it would be nice to know. And I think it's something that it's really fun, because learning with kids, you can go back to the basics and you can start at square one, and it's not like, oh, I need to achieve this massive knowledge that I wish I had as an adult. You could just kind of be like, okay, for the next 10 years, we're going to baby step through this. And, at 40, I'm going to be a lot more educated than I am at 30, which is really fun because the children give that structure and that, I don't know, it makes it seem like it's worth my while to start at square A with this stuff. So anyways, it's fun. So we started with mythology because I was like, this gets referenced a lot. I know it gets referenced a lot. I don't know what it means. It's actually quite a study. And so what we're doing for this, I explained in our homeschool curriculum video, but we had the Delaris book of Greek myths. It's very child appropriate as you can go. And then, excuse me, I also got the workbook with that, which we have not done yet. So we'll see. And then I got the flashcards because there's this giant stack of flashcards. And like, we were watching a movie a long time ago and the dog's name was Cerberus. And I had no context for who Cerberus was. And I'm like, oh, I was reading the book with the kids and I was like, that's Cerberus. Like, he's one of the monsters. Or even yesterday we were reading a book on Michelangelo's life, and it mentions how people called Da Vinci and Michelangelo the Titans, and there's a battle of the Titans. And the kids were like, oh, those are the three kids that were born of Mother Earth and Father Sky, and they were the good kids, basically. Or who else gets referenced? Cyclops get referenced a ton.
Is he in The Incredibles? That's Cyclone.
Like the one-eyed monsters. And it's like, oh, like already like their little light bulbs are going off, because this is just referenced all the time. Like, how often do we hear about Titans? It's like, what even is that referencing? And so now
Yeah,
it's like,
it's the movie, Remember the Titans. It's like, I know what Titans are.
the greater than greats. And obviously it has that connotation, but that connotation goes back all the way back to the Greeks and the Romans, which is just kind of cool. So anyways, it's already been really a fun study, and that's what we're doing for mythology. And then we have, should we do art or Shakespeare?
Whichever one you go, you choose it. You pick. Surprise me.
Surprise me. So, okay, I'll dive into Shakespeare next because I was hearing, I didn't know what we were going to do with Shakespeare. And you didn't seem to know either. Did you? Did you have a preference?
Well, I think that from time to time, I would get like Shakespeare has always been a complete question mark to me. I've had no reference point for Shakespeare where it's like, oh, is there a particular poem from Shakespeare or a particular play? I would hear lines and it's like, oh, that's from this particular play. But I could not tell you that, like, are Romeo and Juliet characters in a particular play, or is that itself a particular play?
Yeah.
Same, does that make sense? Where it's like, I've got no clue, or the much ado about nothing. I always thought it was much to do about nothing, which, I mean, it's more or less the same
idea,
thing. But then I saw that in a book. I was like, oh, got it. It's like, did this guy write poems? Did he write plays? I had no reference for what his work was.
Yeah, I think when I thought of Shakespeare, it goes back to, we didn't do any Shakespeare. I knew about Romeo and Juliet, where it's like, okay, they both commit suicide in the end, so that's just kind of dark. Mm-hmm. And then I had to take a Shakespeare class in college, and I thought, this is going to be great. But the way I was testing out of classes, I just went in and took a test on it. And so I Spark Notes everything because I was like, I have to learn all these characters, or 100 or 200 characters, whatever, and the plots of the storylines and everything in 3 weeks. And so it's just a massive crash course, all went into the short-term memory bank. And the more I was reading these from Spark Notes, reading Spark Notes of Shakespeare is kind of like reading a parent's guide of a movie, where it's the worst of the worst, You're just kind of like, this is terrible. And so I had no desire to read his works after that, because I was like, this guy's just totally lewd and crass and all that, and at best, and then very inappropriate worst, or dark, very dark and murdersome. Anyways, so then I was reading this blog somewhere. I knew we were going to read a little bit of Shakespeare as soon as I adopted the Charlotte Mason philosophy, and they recommended this Nesbitt children's picture book, and I was like, we'll start there, just big gloss over, but I didn't think we were going to go deep, And then I was reading somewhere, and they were mentioning how, aside from the Bible, like the King James Bible specifically, Shakespeare's work to English-speaking languages is the most referenced, most a part of our culture, pieces of literature, which is kind of funny because our Bible is made out of lots of books too.
Yeah, the source material, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's the source material for art. Of all kinds, culture, all this, all that glitters is not gold.
Modern day cinema, probably.
Exactly. No, not cinema. Art is in paintings, songs. Is that cinema? It's just media, I guess.
Yeah, well, I would say I was saying probably even modern day cinema is heavily the source material still probably goes back
I was bringing up with Much Ado About Nothing, Shakespeare. That was the original rom-com. I can't tell you that that's Bless the World, but Shakespeare came up with the plot of a rom-com where the couple is just they like each other from the beginning, but they hate each other, and then they fall in love at the end. And you just are tormented the whole time.
Yeah. It's the winning formula.
Yeah.
You found it.
Exactly. Shakespeare created that. And so I just thought, again, this is something that I want the kids to be able to reference. Years and years ago, I say years and years. Wow. 5 years ago. I wanted the kids to memorize a little bit of Shakespeare. And so they memorized, not knowing anything about Shakespeare. I Googled what's popular, and I got the tomorrow, speech, basically soliloquy in Macbeth. And so I just thought it was.
See, that's a perfect example. I would have heard that and been like, is this a standalone poem that Shakespeare wrote?
Yes.
And that's the one where he says like, it is a tale told by an idiot, right? Is that the same?
Full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
But so that's from a play. Is that what it is?
Yeah. It's from the play Macbeth.
But it's a part. It's somebody has like a little monologue or something.
Yeah.
In the play.
Macbeth basically hears that his wife is going to die. And he's just like, at this point in the play, his heart is just so dark and so filled with torment that he's just like, what's life? Like, it's just a waste of time anyways. We're going down to the grave. Who cares? And anyways, so yeah, I didn't know at the time. So I just had the kids memorize it because I was like, okay, they'll have a reference to Shakespeare. When someone says Shakespeare, if they could pull this out. And also it's funny to hear 5-year-olds say this big dramatic thing. Anyways, but that was it. So I started in on Shakespeare kind of the wrong way if you're going to introduce it to kids. So all that said, we started that way and then didn't really do anything with Shakespeare. And then I was like, whoa, everything is connected to Shakespeare. We actually should totally learn these plots, these characters. He has vibrant storytelling, and just reading the real plays to the kids, it's phenomenal for their comprehension, for their reading comprehension. Like, the more I get around adults, readers, I want my kids to be able to pick up anything and read it. Like, I don't want them to be like, that's above my head. I just want them to just like dive in. And so I read this post where this gal was saying high school is too late for Shakespeare. And I think she's right. Kids are primed for language at a young age. And, you know, my kids are just hanging out with some other kids, and my kids are talking about Shakespeare, our children. And they were like, oh, Shakespeare's dumb. And my kids were like, no, it's not. And I was like, that's what I want. Like, I want them to value this before the peer pressure hits, and it will really be there by high school.
Yeah, because when you're 12 or 13 or 14 and your friends say that's dumb, you're kind of like, oh, is it okay?
It is dumb. Like, dumb. I want them to already be so well versed in it. It's kind of like, no, I'm like confident in knowing my Shakespeare. So anyways, it's going to actually be a pretty serious course of study for us. I have a few references, and one of the most fun ways to learn Shakespeare is memorizing it. So having kids memorize, there is just passage after passage after passage that are so often quoted in our society. It's cool for the kids to be able to have context for where that passage is being taken from, and the characters and the whole story behind it. And so another thing that makes it fun is that when you start out memorizing passages, you memorize, a few spots from Romeo and Juliet. And then I read the story of Romeo and Juliet to the kids. And then we read the actual play. And it's so fun because when you get to those chunks, they're quoting with you like, oh my word, I remember this. And then we actually watched a movie of Romeo and Juliet, and they were quoting chunks, and the kids just were stoked. So it's really fun to start with memorization. If you don't, then it's going to kind of all go over their head. But in doing the memorization, you kind of break down the vocabulary, and they really get to know what's happening. Yeah,
I like taking you mentioned you kind of started Shakespeare in the wrong way. And I do think you were kind of looking at you're like, what's the end goal here? And I think we were wrong in what the end goal was when it came to, I'd say a lot of things in education. And I think the general attitude that we're around with entrepreneurialism, efficiency, like coming up with hacks, and like optimizing your time to get to an end goal can really rob us of what learning is and what life is. Ultimately, we think in such a utilitarian way. We're like, well, what's the point of it? How's it going to serve me? Rather than realizing like, oh, instead of asking, AI for a brief, explanation of a book, it's like, that's not the point. Like reading the book is what changes you. The words have power. And this goes back to our creator, like the word was God. Like that's how he chose to show himself, was like as the word, and he gave us his word. And so I think we're always looking for shortcuts this day and age, and being like, well, just get the answers. Like you're referencing this, like the Spark Notes for the test. You're like, well, the point is to pass the test. And you're kind of like, no, like the material can actually grow you and change you. And we do this in every category of life, or with microwaves, or with like instant coffee machines, or, it's like, no, like the process of making the meal is in and of itself a reward. And then, yeah, of course you need the nutrients and you want to be able to enjoy how it tastes as well. But like taking time to make a coffee, do a pour over or make a tea, you know, that whole tradition of like take time to make the tea. Anyways, I'm getting off topic, but I think if you actually approach the arts, you know, literature and the arts from that perspective, rather than just getting to the end, being like, well, what's the point? Can I pass the test? Or was this going to help me get a job? Or is this going to make me more money? Or how's this going to make me a better person? It's like you just kind of like have to trust the process, read the whole thing, slow it down. I think it's really, really helpful.
Yeah,
if you have that perspective.
So too. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, because I think both you and I really have leaned into just like efficiency for a lot of our life.
Right.
And now we're just like, whoa, like it is the process. It's all about the process. And I feel like we're doing that with a lot of different things in our life. I mean, even with cooking, we see that all the joy has been stripped from cooking when it's all about efficiency. We're thinking, how fast can I get in and out of the kitchen? But it's no fun anymore. Where when you actually slow down and spend more time in the kitchen, it becomes more rewarding and more enjoyable. And the process itself is serving you instead of just trying to get to the end goal, which is food on the table. Yes. So anyways, this is really, really fun. But how I would say we started off way wrong is if I was going to encourage you to start off, I would say start off with a comedy. Okay. So Shakespeare has 3 different things. He has tragedies, histories, and comedies. And we started off in the darkest of dark with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. But that is where the kids had context for a passage they had already learned. And so I was like, we're just going to start with Macbeth. And so I wouldn't start there with your kids. But that said, the story did just blow my children's minds and mine. I kind of skipped over a couple parts that were a little more gruesome. But it is just a bloodbath, and we won't be watching that play for a while. But I really recommend, okay, so I'm going to give you all my resources for Shakespeare. Not that I've convinced you to teach this to your kids. You might be like more scared than ever, but okay. So first we have here Green Tiger's Illustrated Stories from Shakespeare. Okay. There's some creepy looking little elves on the front. But it's cute, and it's honestly, yeah, whatever.
Okay.
I don't love it. Okay.
Oh, you don't love this one?
I didn't just like, that was the first thing I got. And I felt like it gets all the points across, but it's a little too factual. I feel like the stories are a little too short. Shakespeare has so many characters that if you're just boiling it down to the basic plot line, it kind of takes the joy out of reading it because there's too many facts you have to get in. So anyways, what I enjoy way more are Shakespeare stories from Leon Garfield. And he is an excellent writer in and of himself. Like, okay, let me just read this, okay, for King Henry the Fourth. Though murdered kings, like all dead men, lie quiet and unoffending in the ground, they rot and spread. Okay, I shouldn't have started on that one because I can't pronounce like 3 other words.
Oh, man. That was a good start, though.
It was a good start. But it's like his writing style in and of itself like draws you in. It just sucks you in. And then he has so many real quotes of Shakespeare mixed in there. So the kids' vocabulary is expanding. They're recognizing quotes from the real play. And it's really fun. So we read Macbeth out of here, and just to the older 2 kids, and they just were mesmerized. So that was good. Also, it does teach great, you just see the frailty of humanity, I guess, when you're reading it, and how quickly you can get corrupted. Okay, so those are the 2 things that we read for introducing kids to the story. And then I have this Tragedies by William Shakespeare, and these are the full plays of his tragedies that are unabridged. And I read these aloud to the kids once they have a context we've memorized some passages, they've read the story, and then I read this loud while they play Lego. And it's just introducing them to the language. And I don't care if it all goes over their head. Like, they're getting the storyline after every scene. I'll be like, hey, what happened in that scene? And sometimes they know all of it, and sometimes they're a little fuzzy and they pick out like 1 or 2 things. But I think it's just great for comprehension. They don't know they're getting quizzed. And I don't want them to be shocked when they read stuff like this later. So anyways, this is fun. I only have the Tragedies and the unabridged. again, we just don't start with the tragedies, you guys. How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare. This is by Ken Ludwig, and this is phenomenal. I think it's 25 or 26 passages of Shakespeare, and he breaks down how to memorize them. And so this is just really fun. So we learned our Romeo and Juliet passages out of this book. And tomorrow is in here. I know a bank where the wild thyme grows. Just like very popular lines in here, but he breaks down how to actually memorize it. So that's where we start with actual memorization of the Shakespeare. But it's been phenomenal. And then, so after Macbeth, then we did Romeo and Juliet. I'll have some recordings on Substack of the kids quoting it because I think they do a great job. And that one is also very tragic. But I think, I was telling Elisha, when you're young, I think it's almost easier to be exposed to some of this stuff. If you're like 16 years old, it might not be the best time to get exposed to like suicide. Yeah, exactly. Or like romance where you're like, oh, I'd kill myself for this person. Because you really do feel like you're head over heels and heels overhead. And you're just so confused. Where I feel like, an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old, it's just kind of objective. Like, oh man, that
was a bad call.
Bad call.
Yeah.
Stinks to them. So it sounds kind of heavy, but I feel like it's actually a good way to introduce heavy concepts to kids while they think it is just like a play and they act out the play. And it's kind of like this make-believe tragic fairy tale versus what it can mean. It'll mean more and more and more, I guess, as you become an adult.
Yeah. And I mean, it's to be determined on how this shapes them, like going forward. And we obviously daily want our kids to be just saturated in God's word and have that be the authoritative truth. Going to God's word, I remember the story of, King Saul is slain in the battlefield and his arm bearer, falls on his sword because of the despair that he has. And I remember reading that with the kids and they're like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, there's again, suicide or killing himself in that biblical story. Not to try to justify this or validate this, but I actually do think it is good from my perspective at a young age to really start having it be just factual that this is the authoritative word of God that is infallible and that we go to for our eternal hope and that we build our life on this. These things are not. This is man's wisdom. This is man's creation, and it has shaped history. It's going to continue to be influential in the world that you're brought up in. You're going to come across this on a regular basis. But I don't want my kids coming upon atheist concepts when, like you said, when they're 16. And just being rocked like, oh man, it's like, I just want them to be aware of the fact that like God's word is sound and true and that people have hated it since the beginning of time and have come up with all sorts of false religions and their own ideas of God, or they've rejected God altogether. And so when there are those more trying times or those crises of faith that I do think are, I don't know if they're inevitable, but I think they are common in young people. I definitely had my fair share of them. That it's kind of like, oh, that's right. We've been through this. We've talked about this. We can go back and reference God's word, and we've been through the opposing views, the opposing thoughts. Because a lot of these things are in opposition to God's truth. A lot of them are.
Well, I think they're actually portrayed kind of alongside God's truth. Like Macbeth, when his heart is turned and he's coveting the position of king and he goes through all these murders, it shows how kind of like, one lie leads to another lie. One murder, you have to do another murder. You have to do another murder to cover up. And he's haunted and he's tormented and he just dies in grief. I think that whole process it was interesting to hear our eldest son's breakdown of it. He goes, he was just so burdened by his sin. He didn't want to continue living, And it's like, nowhere in there does it mention sin. But you feel the burden of his sin growing on him. Wow. And he feels that burden. So I do think actually a lot of these things are aligned with maybe the Proverbs where there's this cause and effect
What about
situation.
Because again, I'm just completely naive to all this, like Romeo and Juliet, for instance. How is that? What's the narrative around those deaths? Because there's a bunch of deaths in that one. Like who's like the cousin that?
Yeah, and that's even like that. The Capulets and the Montagues have a feud, family feuds, and their kids end up essentially dying for it. And so then at the end, the families reconcile and are like, we've been super foolish. We're going to stop feuding because, how brutal this was.
Yeah, like our family's paying for it.
Yeah. So I felt like it was a happy ending, actually. Yeah, but I think it totally made sense in the story where people continue dying for valor, like you kill me, I kill you type of feuding. And then in the end, they're realizing
this isn't worth
this
it.
This is foolish, and I think they saw the foolishness their kids went to and are like, we're super foolish too. I also do like the perspective of it with the kids being like, yeah, they see how dumb, Romeo is drinking poison. Juliet's just asleep. They know she's asleep.
Right.
Like, just wait another hour. Like, you're so pathetic and so dramatic. And then she's so pathetic and dramatic. And you're like, you see that. And I want them to know that, like, too, like, you're capable of feeling like it's the end of the world,
right?
And it's not.
Yeah.
And so far I haven't been, I guess I haven't been bummed out by any of the messages coming through. I'm kind of like, okay, so far it's fair. But again, we started in the tragedies. We're going to Much Ado About Nothing next. And so we'll see kind of how that goes. But
yeah, I'm excited.
We'll see. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
So there's that. Okay. And then the other thing is art. Because this was something that we didn't study. I don't know about you. I took a humanities course in college, but again, I tested out of the course and I did the math. I ran the numbers. And when you do CLEP tests, they don't count towards your GPA. So it's just a pass or fail. So being the efficient person that I was like, you know what? If I don't study the whole art portion of humanities, I'm strong in literature, I was strong in the other subjects, I can still get a passing grade. So I just skipped the entire art chunk. The only thing that stuck with me was that Michelangelo created the David sculpture, and that is it. And that's all I took from.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I don't think I studied the arts because like sociology was one of the humanities that I don't know how many credits I had to get in the humanities, but I don't think we covered in sociology. That would be a humanity, right? I think.
Well, yeah, I took like a specific it was called humanities, and then I took sociology too, because you took sociology with me too.
Yeah, I did a philosophy course, but I never studied the arts ever.
Yeah.
Or the artists, and the ones that you're referencing, yeah.
But I do feel like as I got older, I started being like, oh, I want to know what a Rembrandt is or a Monet is, or like, what are these, a Vermeer, or, how do you even pronounce these artists' names?
I think you did pretty good there.
Pronunciation is really hard for me. You guys probably noticed on the podcast, I botch stuff a lot because I am like primarily just self-taught and didn't sit in lectures. I read everything. So now it's like, I don't want to steer the kids wrong with pronunciation.
Yeah, that's a trait of like a true homeschooler. It's like we can spell it, but do not ask us to pronounce it. Yeah.
It's like there's a big memory, like knowledge bank up here that comes out very twisted. So, anyways, I want to help steer the kids correctly in that. But what was I going to say with all the art stuff? Oh, it's like I do want the kids to be able to go into an art gallery one day and not be like, this is boring and leave. Because I remember going to an art gallery as a kid and being like, what is all this? It's all kind of strange. None of it's really interesting. And I'm not saying like there's inappropriate art in certain galleries and stuff like that. So it wasn't that. It was just kind of like, okay, let's leave.
Yeah, a chair, like some chair sitting there.
Exactly. But like, if I saw like the girl with the pearl earring or whatever, if I saw Mona Lisa, I would be like, aha, I have seen that before. And like when you have that recognition, it's exciting to feel like I just found something that I had prior knowledge to, but that would be probably it.
I think that's what's so interesting about us as humans is that we will talk about our proclivities and our propensities as though they are like just biologically ingrained and we can't change them, when it really is so much nurture and what we've been exposed to and what we are already familiar with. And then we gravitate more and more towards those things. And so I think I see this in music all the time where like people that have just had a little, like just a sliver of technical training start to really enjoy music. But people that don't, they're like, "Oh, I'm terrible at music. I couldn't do it." And we just tell ourselves those things. I think it's the exact same thing with art appreciation, where when it's completely foreign to you, you're like, "Oh, I don't like art." It's like, well, no, you just need to know a little bit. And then you can really start appreciating it. I think that goes in a bunch of different categories. I've seen so many people that could like just detested, football. Like they could not watch football.
I was going to say football came to my mind.
Yeah. And then it's like they marry somebody that enjoys football and they learn like one rule, or they learn like one strategy that a team's going for and they're hooked, right? They're diehards. And so it's really hard to enjoy any sport, any form of art, any music, anything that you just have zero exposure to, or just reference points for. And I don't think it actually takes that much to give people enough reference so that they can enjoy things.
Yeah, I think that that's why as a culture, especially here in America, our tastes are what they are, is because we have familiarity with those things at a young age. So like sports, massive appetite for sports in our culture because we understand them. Whereas like art, we aren't really exposed to that very often. And so it's kind of like, I don't understand this. I'm just not interested in it. So I want my kids to be interested in it because I would like to go to more art galleries in my lifetime. Right. Elisha would. Yeah. And I would like to take the kids. And it's so fun already with the few art pieces that they know. They recognize, if we're at a vintage store and they see the print, like, oh my goodness, I know who painted that. And that's Van Gogh. Like Van Gogh was the first artist that we stumbled upon. And the kids love A Starry Night. And anytime they see that painting, they get so excited. And I'm like, I just want this recognition with more paintings. And so,
and I think that, not that we're trying to take shortcuts here, like I already said, but I actually don't. Again, I'm probably going to sound like
little shortcuts.
I'm probably going to sound like a moron to anybody that's studied art or knows the artist. I actually don't think there's that many pieces that circulate and that you come across in a lifetime, right? I'm sure you can
like
go
the
deep.
20%.
That's what I mean. It's like the 80-20.
80%.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you learn the 20%, you kind of know what you're talking about.
That's what I think.
Or you can talk to the people that know what they're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that just show up the most.
Yes.
And you're going to come across them over and over and over again. And of course, you can go deep and nerd out on it and see who those people's inspirations were and who, was teaching them. But that's my uneducated guess.
No, I think that's true. Like Dürer, I think that's how you say his name, but I don't know. I read about this. He just kept popping up. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm starting to put together the pieces that he painted. And I haven't looked up how to pronounce his name, but I think that, there's just... Or Monet's, like, I don't know. Those are mentioned all the time. Those are referenced all the time. So starting to put together that style of art is, it makes it easier to reference. And I don't know.
Yeah, because does he do a lot of the landscape?
The more fun it is to live in the world.
It is with any topic. With any topic, yes. And learning begets learning. You're like, no way. That's why I've been embarrassed every time. I'm probably going to continue to be embarrassed as I say things like, oh, that's dumb or that's not interesting, because it's not interesting to me because I don't know anything about it, whether that's mechanics, or I used to roll my eyes at people that would just nerd out on their guns, right? Like 10 years ago, I remember you and I sitting in that room, those guys all talking about their guns.
In North Idaho. We didn't live here at the time.
We didn't. We were visiting. And here I am, I'm like, oh, this is really fascinating, actually. Like you just because you know a little bit and then you're able to really get into it. And so I don't want to be the guy anymore that's like, that's dumb or that's pointless or that's not worth studying.
I would say as a general rule, you definitely aren't. You're an interested person. And we want to raise interested children. Like we want them to glorify our Creator, to acknowledge that other people have glorified our Creator for thousands of years and be able to appreciate that work and give glory back to God instead of just scoffing at things. We really just don't want scoffing children. And I think that kids, when they're really little, they don't have that peer pressure telling them what's cool, what's not cool. And so you could really pour into them now where we aren't going to be able to set those appetites later in life. It's like they might meet someone, who they have a crush on, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'll get into that or whatever. Yeah. But like, you're kind of reliant on peers at a certain point as a parent as to what your children's appetites are going to be. And so we just really want to take advantage of this time where what we say is cool and stuff culture into our kids, not for culture's sake, but again, because I do think it makes the world around you more interesting, the more dots you have to connect. And where you already have those knowledge points, you go down those roads further because you can add to the current knowledge base. I think that's why media to me is such an unworthy knowledge base to like new media to be pouring into our kids right now. It's because I don't necessarily want them to add a ton to that knowledge base and keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. Like I don't want that to be their biggest snowball that they have is like references to media. And so I'd rather it be to, you know, literature that has been timeless before new media came out. So anyways, I think the thing that makes art obviously controversial is nudity in art. And obviously we're going to be very cautious in that subject. You know, we have these giant books of Van Gogh, Monet, and Leonardo da Vinci right now. And I go through, the kids flip through them while I read stories to them about these painters. And then when they find like a super revealing nude photo, I color in with a Sharpie. Like we just destroy the book, but it is what it is. Yeah. They're like, whoa, mama, her dress looks real. I'm like, I know, Leonardo could have used me helping him out here. But I do think that it's not something that we need to be totally scared about either on a, like, if you look at the Sistine Chapel or something like that, I didn't feel any of the kids were uncomfortable with that. I wasn't uncomfortable with that. Total ice though. Like, you know, you have one of our kids was just running around nude, or our 2-year-old the other day on the property. And I was like, I would never have let that happen with like our first couple. But it's like, you know, you've had 5 boys. It's like the male anatomy is just kind of like been seen a million times by loose. And anyways, not that we don't want modesty in our home, but I do think we're probably more conscientious on female nudity in art because of the nature of the boys and everything else. And Luce's age, she's just not real traumatized.
Yes.
So anyways, we'll see where that takes us to. But yeah, it's been really, really fun to dive into these things.
And regardless of what you choose to do with your children's education and how you choose to go about it, I do think that as parents, we have such a unique opportunity to create children that are not scoffers, because that is not a becoming trait for Christians or for anyone, but definitely as like God's children. We want to enjoy his creation and take pleasure in it and then bring him glory in it. And you hear this come out and it's coming straight from the parents. When you hear a 7, 8, 9 or 6, 7, 8, 9 say something's dumb or they don't want to do anything
under 12.
Yeah,
it's coming straight from the parents.
It's coming from the parents. And so you have that opportunity to be like, oh, that's interesting. And I know it's easy to get insecure as a parent if it's a field that you are totally naive or ignorant to, which that's like pretty much every field. For me, I feel very insecure at times, but I don't want to tear those fields down or those disciplines or those practices down because of my ignorance or insecurity. And so you can build it up and be like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know that much about it, but it's probably worth looking into, or that's cool that you're learning that. You don't have to, just like the most disheartening thing you can tell your kids in their education is just kind of like, well, that's not really worth learning, or that's not going to serve you in life, or that's not, you're not going to use that ever.
It's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time. Like, just get through it. Or it's like, don't do that. Like, you have this opportunity to instill a love of learning and an interest in what God's created and what God's children have created over the centuries, and fuel that. Like, they're going to become skeptics inevitably in their teen years, right? Like, you don't have to teach kids when they're 12, 13, and 14 to wonder if things are cool or not cool. They're going to get there. But this is a time to really fuel the creativity and the interest and the intrigue and give them some, I guess, like supply of skills and capabilities and knowledge that they can have the rest of their life.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to grow in that area too. Everything, there are so many things that are worth taking an interest in. So, okay, guys, that's what we have for you today. Are you using any of these things in your homeschool? Are you wary of them? Are you like, are you kidding? We've been doing this for years now. I think it's interesting to hear different parents' perspective on these topics, or your experience studying them. Like, where would potential pitfalls be, which we look out for, because we do want to be wise and learning. So,
talk to you next time, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.